Hello, everyone. Today we're going to do a brief parent education workshop on reinforcement. Now, you've probably been hearing the words reinforcement often from us through our videos on discrete trial teaching and working with your child. And you're probably even hearing those words when your teachers present on different skills that you're teaching your child. So I want to just go over what reinforcement is, how you can find some reinforcers for your child, and different ways to enhance motivation through reinforcement. So first of all, what is reinforcement and why do we use this word? Definition of reinforcement is anything immediately following a behavior that increases the future occurrences of that behavior, meaning that once we deliver this item after something happens, the probability of the child continuing to do it goes up. It really can be any kind of stimulus that is presented after a behavior occurs. So sometimes if I had a student ask for milk and I give them some milk, the probability that they'll use those words to ask for milk goes up. So the reinforcer there would be milk. Whereas if they scream and cry on the ground, we don't know what they're asking for. That behavior may not increase because it doesn't result in us giving them the reinforcer, which is milk. This is used often during teaching procedures when we present students with something to do like, okay, 1, 2, what comes next? And they say 3, and we praise them and clap and they smile, and the probability of them continuing to say 3 and being motivated to do that goes up. So it's reinforcement. Reinforcement can also work against what we need, right? So our student is climbing up on the bookshelf in the office and we say, hey, stop that, get down. And they smile and continue to do it, right? Even though we wanted to decrease and to stop that behavior, we actually ended up reinforcing it because we're increasing the probability that the behavior occurs in the future. So reinforcers are different for everybody. Some students like big, enthusiastic praise. Some students are unable to contact that type of reinforcement. All kids like different activities, different toys, different games, different snacks. So again, make sure that you're working individually with your child to determine what's a reinforcer. If you're not sure what you can use as a reinforcer during work time, you can ask your child if they're able to answer. You can ask your child's teacher. You can put a couple snacks or toys out and have a student pick which one they want, which is kind of a free operant or observation kind of preference assessment. You might give them a little sample of something and see how often they engage in utilizing that material. There are all different ways of kind of figuring out what's reinforcing to your child. But really, even though on the next slide, there's some examples of how to systematically determine reinforcers using something called a preference assessment, really your observation of your child will really allow you to know what toys, snacks, and social interactions are their favorite types. Here's just a fancy chart that shows some of the ways that we kind of determine different reinforcers in school. So there's ways to ask a person, which doesn't always work if our kids are just emerging in their language. Again, all the way on the right side of your screen, you have observe the person, so you can observe them naturally. So put them in wherever they play and see what they do, or you can contrive that situation or that kind of free operant setting and put out only certain toys and see which ones they play with most often. There are also some trial-based methods, again, which are on the next slide, and some links to those, but that involves putting out several choices at once, having a student pick one, and then either they're replacing it to see if they continue to pick that or not replacing it, and having them choose something different so you can get kind of a hierarchy of things they like. But again, if you're being a keen observer and over time watching what your students choose over and over again, that's a pretty nice assessment of what could potentially be utilized as a reinforcer. Again, here are some of those formal assessment methods, so you can pause the video here and type in these links to look at some other ways of determining reinforcers. This is, again, a more systematic way, but if you're struggling, I would ask your teacher, your child's teacher, how you might go about this. Now, a lot of people ask, okay, well, why do I always need a reinforcer for my child to learn? They should just do it because that's what they're supposed to do. But really, in the world, we all do things because they're adaptive, they work. Um, I love my job more than anything, but I still get a paycheck at the end of the week, which is, type of generalized reinforcer. Another reason we need reinforcement is because some of our children struggle with their language, social skills, and other learning tasks. So they feel harder. So we need to make sure that we have them motivated in order to perform and to learn the correct, ways to respond. Really, with all of our kids, if you want to do any teaching, you need to make sure there's a reinforcer, because it doesn't really count as teaching if your child is trying to run away from you. Another point I wanted to make is using punishment is temporary. So you might take something away when your child does something wrong. The problem with that is they're not learning how to ask for it appropriately, or how to replace that behavior of doing something incorrect. So punishment is temporary and will work maybe as long as it's in place and it functions to decrease behavior. But reinforcement is really a teaching procedure. And again, we're getting an increased future frequency of responding. So you're going to do more things right for a longer period of time. The great thing about reinforcement is you can also fade it back. So first, we're going to give this kid a little sip of milk every single time they ask for milk because they're just learning it. And then, they'll ask for milk and we'll say, well, that's nice, really nice asking, but, we have to wait till dinner. And we can eventually fade out, that verbal praise, thanks so much, and how often they're getting reinforcement for asking, and fade that out, but the student still maintains that response because, again, they've learned it over time. So different ways that you can increase the value of reinforcement and behavior analysis, this is called an establishing operation, is you want to start to create motivation. So maybe holding it up, showing the child that you're able to use it. Some of our students are verbal and capable of understanding if I say, okay, first we're going to do X, then you're going to play with this. You can create motivation that way. It's really important to remember that these reinforcers cannot be items that students have access to all the time, right? If students can eat goldfish whenever they want, they're not going to be motivated to then work to earn goldfish. One time I had a student, the only thing he really, really enjoyed was a can of Diet Coke. And he worked really, really nicely for even just a few sips. But one day that all stopped. And after a couple days, I called his mom and I asked, okay, well, what's the deal? What's happening? Is he sick? He doesn't want his Diet Coke. She goes, oh, well, he, gets a Diet Coke when he gets a whole one when he gets home from school every day. And I said, well, okay. He's learned that I can get this Diet Coke non-contingently, meaning I can get it, for free. So why would I work for it here? So creating, a state of deprivation, not letting the child have access to the reinforcer all the time is really a good strategy. Sometimes you can provide the student with some brief contact with the item to kind of get them excited to earn it before they have to earn it. So giving a little piece of goldfish before working in the act that they want more. If somebody gave me just a bite of chocolate cake, I wouldn't be able to just have a bite. I would be motivated to work for the whole thing. Same thing with toys or activities, letting them access it for a few seconds and then having them work for it is a nice way to kind of create that establishing operation, increase that desire for that. It's really important that you have a plan and you can specify when and how children will obtain reinforcement. So do they have to follow directions the first time? Are they getting this, when they sort in the YouTube video we have here, when they do it correctly? it's really important to just specify those things so we're really working on reinforcing the behavior we're trying to increase. Another quick point I wanted to make is you guys are home. A lot of people are home with kiddos, sometimes with other family members, extended family members. A question I want to pose is what happens if mommy delivers all these praise for following rules and grandma doesn't? What happens a lot of times is child will follow the rules when mom's, given them because they've earned reinforcement, praise after that. But then grandma doesn't, and they're, not increasing following rules because they're not earning praise, or grandma doesn't care, or, she's occupied with other things. So it's really important. The point I'm trying to make is it's really important to make sure that reinforcement is consistent across individuals so that behavior increases faster. If we have different sets of rules with different adults, it's going to be really hard for children to generalize the skill that they're learning. So just a quick summary of reinforcement. Reinforcement, remember the definition, increases the future frequency of behavior. The more immediate, the better. So we want to make sure that right after we see that skill or that behavior we want to see, we're delivering that reinforcer. We talked about ways to determine what a reinforcer is through preference assessment and through observation. We talked a little bit about the use of reinforcers, but I think the best way to kind of understand this even more is to watch some of those how-to videos and see how to teach different skills and when to deliver reinforcement. And then we also talked about ways to create an establishing operation, meaning to make reinforcers even more potent when we're working with students. All right, thanks everybody so much for coming. Hopefully this video helped you understand some of the principles of reinforcement and how to utilize it with your child. Thank you.